you very much for that and for your 3 points. I mean, it's very interesting, isn't it? It's a myth. There's nothing different about humanitarian leadership. Well, that's an interesting one that people may want to pick up in the discussion, because I read the report, and I thought it may be possible to draw another conclusion, but we'll see. And the second point, keeping calm and it's only common sense. Or is it magic? You mentioned the word magic, didn't you, for leadership? Is it common sense or magic? I don't know. And the third... And the third one about collective leadership in non-hierarchical settings. Very interesting. Now, it's a perfect introduction to you, Tim, because you must know one hell of a lot about leadership in hierarchical settings. So I wonder how that translates.
Sure. I'm going to use some of the words. Actually, I agree with what's just been said, and I think Marv might want to come back on it, but I'm not sure actually we're a million miles apart on it. I think like a lot of these things, it's to do with language. Let me start by saying I really value this report. It's going to sound a bit condescending, this, but I have to say I think this is long overdue. This debate about leadership in this arena is long overdue. And we could argue about various aspects of the report, and I could say some of it is a bit of motherhood and apple pie and one or two other things, but actually I think genuinely it is a really important piece of work. And one of the last things I want to get to is, okay, so where do we go from here? I've got 3 points, if I may, that I want to make, inevitably coming from a military perspective and a military background. First thing is, the team is right to recognise that this is, there's no easy or simple answers to this. I understand in the year 2000 there were 2,000 books published on leadership. This is one of the most observed phenomena on Earth and the least understood. It is, it is what it is. It's really difficult to get your minds around. We're dealing with humanity, we're dealing with very difficult situations, and we're dealing with the way that people bounce off each other and organisations bounce off each other, and so on. But in terms of this issue, one of the things I want to pick up on is the levels of leadership. We can talk about leadership and command. We use different words in the military, but tactical level stuff is the day-to-day engagement on the ground, the building of the refugee camp, the dealing with the immediate medical problems, and so on. And the tactical level stuff in terms of leadership is often about follow me, be with me as we engage with this. At the top end of the spectrum, there's a more military term, command, strategic level, which is largely about go on. I'm telling you I want you to go and do something. I'm not going to be with you, but go on and do it. This operational level that the team have latched onto is the link between these things. It's how do you plan the campaign in, again, my language, the theatre of operations, to pull together all the agencies, all the different organisations, and the leader in this environment is a mix of the go on and the follow me. Somebody who has to stay in the head office, do the staff planning, think through the campaign plan, but then get out and about and engage with people and lead his own staff or her staff and lead the teams on the ground. So this is a really important level, and it's a level that we in the British military only latched onto about 10 or 15 years ago. And we call it the operational level of command. And it's a really important issue, and again, I'm delighted that it's been looked at here. It is the most difficult. And it is about this business of dealing with chaos and uncertainty. And just to reiterate the point, you only really know you've got a good leader around you when the proverbial really does hit the fan and the pressure is on, and then you see the reality of what people are really like. So it is about chaos and uncertainty and dealing with chaos and uncertainty. Now at each of those levels, there are 3 other things that are going on. I mentioned command, there's also management and leadership. Now I could wax lyrical about this because I feel very strongly about this, but there's nothing wrong with management. Management is important. And a good leader at the operational level has to be a good manager. Managing resources, managing time, managing money, managing real estate. But they also have to be a leader, and leadership is different to management. It's about people. One of the resources we have, the most important resource, is people, and leadership is about people, not stuff. Now in that context, there are, again, in terms of delivering an output, there are 3 crucial things required. There is the stuff. There's the logistics, there's the getting the right kit around to various places and so forth. There's what I would call a conceptual component, doctrine, understanding what we're trying to achieve here. And then there is in this leadership piece, what actually, interestingly, and a lot of people find this surprising, in the British Army we call the moral component. It's about emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence. It's about words like trust and respect and courage. And I think what Margaret's picked up on here is, really importantly, is that these case studies, all they show is that these were people who were trusted and respected, and they had courage. And where does that come from? Well, we could be here for hours discussing that, but maybe we want to come back to it. And in that context, what they were dealing with was a whole series of, to use the jargon, tame problems we've seen before. We need to throw management at it, we need to follow processes. And then the really difficult stuff was dealing with the wicked problems, stuff we haven't faced before. And the role of the leader, and this again, this balance between heroic and collective leadership, the role of the leader is not to make the decision, it's to ask the right questions, get the team around. What do we think we could do about that? Keep teasing it out. And then maybe, picking up the earlier point, a timely decision being forced by this person saying, okay, we've had enough, we need to make the decision now, let's crack on and try and make that work. So there's a whole raft of sort of interlinked things there. But in that context, I'd want to sort of challenge Mark in one sense by saying it's not all about art. It is about the magic of me. It is about my emotional intelligence, my spiritual intelligence, my ability to communicate and so forth. But there is science to this. There are tools, there are models that we can look at in terms of developing leadership. And there are places we can go and debates we can have that help me analyze leadership, and in particular help me to analyze me and what my strengths are and my weaknesses, put me through processes where I am asked to take risk. Going back to the risk issue, there's a difference between risk and gamble. It's about outcome. It's about putting people in a safe environment. So I think one of the things that comes out of this study is, where do we go from here? Well, it's about, and I'm going to come back to some of the points you've made, it's about how do we collectively as a community start collaborating with each other, working with one another, and educating and training people in this whole arena of leadership. It is, I think, a really important issue. And I'll just finish now by saying, I mentioned outside in the corridor before we started, there are 3 organizations that for good or ill I found myself sort of latching onto. ALNAP is one of them, ELRA is another one, and Randolph Kent and the Humanitarian Futures Program. I think these 3 organizations are really getting into some really important stuff. And we've got to take this, we the community have got to take this work and say, okay, where do we go from here? And I wouldn't want to see this piece of work simply finishing up with another study. And that's very easy to say, and I'm not quite sure, what it does mean. But, I would want to press on that. My only other final point is, which we can talk in discussion, is that this whole issue of allowing people the freedom, and it's picking up again on a point that was made earlier. I actually don't think there is such a thing as humanitarian leadership. There is leadership in a humanitarian environment. And the military and business and others are also having to work in a globalized world with interagencies and international staffs and national staffs and so on. And I can speak from the British military point of view, we're having to grapple with all of that stuff too. So yes, there are aspects of the context, but learning this together, learning from one another. So for example, the British Army, we talk about mission command. What that means is, I'm going to tell you what needs to be achieved, I'm going to give you the resources to do it, and then I'm going to get off your back and let you get on with it. Easy to talk about, but actually quite difficult. But if you train and educate and practice and exercise it, you then see people sort of lifting themselves into that role, having the freedom to take risk, having to be accountable for the outcomes, not for the form filling that's been referred to. So there's a number of others we can come back to, but again, it sounds a bit condescending, but I really want to value what the team have done. I think it's a really important piece of work, and the real question is, where does it go from here, I think.
Tim, thank you very much for your insights and wisdom there. I mean, I'll just pick up on one thing. It's not about magic in art, it's about science. As well. Oh, well, if you put them both together, I guess you get alchemy, don't you? So maybe it's about alchemy. And the 2,000 books on leadership recently, I mean, that's a very interesting phenomena. And I was speaking to a colleague of mine recently, and he told me that there's been a synthesis done looking at all these books on leadership. And I said to him, well, what did it tell us? And apparently, there was only one common characteristic about leaders that came out of these books. And apparently, and I'm right about this, Paul, I hope, was that leaders are either very tall or very, very short. And apparently that don't want to don't want to lower the tone of the discussion, but that's what I was told. So we'll put that to one side anyway. Let's take a round of questions now. And we'll come on to Malcolm later to see if our online participants have been listening to this. So, questions.